They called him D.B. Cooper, the man who vanished into thin air. On Thanksgiving Eve, 1971, a quiet man boarded Flight 305, carrying nothing but a black briefcase. Hours later, he hijacked the plane, demanded $200,000 in cash, and forced the pilots into a storm over the Pacific Northwest. Then, at 10,000 feet, he jumped into freezing darkness, into violent winds, into the dead of night. No body was ever found, no parachute, no trace. More than 50 years later, the FBI still doesn't know who he really was. Did D.B. Cooper survive the impossible? Or did the forest bury the truth forever? This is The Ghost of Flight 305, the D.B. Cooper Mystery.
Portland, Oregon, November 24th, 1971. The rain is coming down in sheets. A man in a dark suit walks up to the Northwest Orient counter, pays cash for a one-way ticket, and gives his name as Dan Cooper. He boards Flight 305 and takes a seat in the back row. He orders a bourbon and soda. Then he calmly hands a handwritten note to a flight attendant named Florence Schaffner. She slips it into her pocket, thinking it's just a businessman's phone number, until he leans in and tells her she'd better look at it. He has a bomb. To prove he isn't bluffing, he pops the latches on his briefcase. Inside, the flight attendant sees a tangle of wires, a heavy battery, and red cylinders. His demands are exact. He wants $200,000 in $20 bills, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck waiting on a tarmac when they land in Seattle. Most hijackings of the era were chaotic, highly politicized diversions to Cuba. Dan Cooper, on the other hand, was quiet and strictly business. He paid his bar tab, thanked the crew, and let the 36 passengers go without a scratch. In Seattle, the FBI delivers the cash and the parachutes. Cooper keeps the flight crew on board and orders the plane back into the air, heading south toward Mexico. But he insists on highly specific flight conditions: a low altitude of 10,000 feet and an unpressurized cabin. Cooper knew exactly what he was doing. The Boeing 727 had a unique physical vulnerability, a rear set of steps called an aft air stair that could be lowered in mid-flight. He ordered the remaining crew into the cockpit and locked them in. Somewhere over the dense, mountainous forests of the Pacific Northwest, Cooper cracked that rear door open. He tied the heavy bag of money to his waist and stepped off the metal stairs into a pitch-black -7-degree storm, falling through 200-mile-per-hour winds. When the plane finally landed in Reno to refuel, FBI agents swarmed the tarmac and breached the cabin with weapons drawn. They found the rear stairs down and the cabin completely empty. A man had successfully extorted a major airline, executed a flawless mid-air escape, and vanished into the freezing rain without a trace, sparking the only unsolved commercial skyjacking in American history. The FBI immediately launched Operation Norjack. They scoured the drop zone with military helicopters and ground search teams, combing through miles of rugged wilderness. They never found a body, a parachute, or a single shred of clothing. Investigators soon realized Cooper had outsmarted them from the start. By demanding 4 parachutes, 2 mains and 2 reserves, he bluffed the FBI into thinking he might take a hostage with him. It forced authorities to supply functioning gear instead of rigged, sabotaged chutes. The trail went totally cold for 9 years. Then, in 1980, an 8-year-old boy named Brian Ingram was smoothing out sand for a campfire on Tennebar along the Washington side of the Columbia River. He dug up 3 rotting bundles of $20 bills, totaling $5,800. The FBI matched the serial numbers perfectly. It was Cooper's ransom money. But the cash created more problems than it solved. The edges of the bills were heavily degraded and rounded, leading some hydrologists to argue the money washed downstream from a corpse. Others insisted it was intentionally buried deep in the sand by a survivor. Finding a fraction of the loot decades later didn't close the case. It only proved the money hit the ground, leaving the fate of the man attached to it entirely unknown. The FBI had to rely on the only piece of physical evidence Cooper actually left behind on the plane: a cheap black clip-on tie from JCPenney, resting on seat 18E. Decades later, advanced microscopic analysis pulled over 100,000 particles from the fabric of that tie. Hidden among them were microscopic fragments of pure titanium and stainless steel alloys. In 1971, titanium wasn't common. These specific metallic signatures linked directly to Crucible Steel, a manufacturing plant in Pennsylvania that served as a major subcontractor for Boeing aircraft. The FBI investigated over 800 suspects. There was Richard McCoy Jr., a Green Beret who pulled off an almost identical aft stair hijacking 5 months later, but died in a shootout with federal agents. There was Barbara Dayton, a recreational pilot with a deep grudge against the Federal Aviation Administration, who confessed the crime to her friends before suddenly taking it back. And more recently, investigators pointed to Vince Peterson, a titanium research engineer whose professional background perfectly aligns with the microscopic metal shards found on the tie. Yet, despite the deathbed confessions, the copycats, and the tantalizing forensic breadcrumbs, the FBI could never definitively pin the crime on the man in the dark sunglasses. In July of 2016, the FBI officially suspended the active investigation into the Cooper hijacking. After 45 years, they admitted the trail was finally dead. But the public never let it go. Cooper became an outlaw folk hero. He hijacked without a shot, politely paid for his drinks, embarrassed the federal government, and ghosted into the night. We're left with two starkly different realities. He either slammed into the Oregon pines and died freezing in the mud alongside $200,000, or he walked out of those woods and quietly lived out the American dream. We will probably never know his real name, but by jumping into the void and never hitting the ground, Dan Cooper achieved something much rarer than the perfect crime.